The man on the sidewalk's sun had just started rising over San Francisco. The early light turned the glass buildings into mirrors of fire, and the streets were quiet, except for the soft rumble of a bus and the occasional honk from an impatient driver. A light breeze moved the litter across the sidewalk like tiny dancers with nowhere to be. Sundar, Pichai, walked down Market Street with his hands deep in his coat pockets. Trying to blend in like any other man headed to work, no one really noticed him. They didn't know he was the CEO of Google. They didn't know he had meetings that would shape the future of technology. They didn't know that under his calm face, he was carrying something heavy. Something that had nothing to do with business. He had just come back from a meeting overseas that didn't go as planned. His mind kept playing the same scene again and again, a presentation that fell flat, a decision that could cost thousands of jobs, and a sense of pressure that even someone like him couldn't ignore anymore. Sundar was tired. Not just from travel, but from life moving too fast and meaning too little lately. He had a habit of walking when he felt this way. No bodyguards. No car. Just his feet and his thoughts. And that's when he saw the man. The man was sitting near a broken bus stop bench, surrounded by two large black trash bags. His hair was wild and gray. His clothes were stained with rain, food, and the kind of pain you can't wash out. He had one shoe on, and the other foot was wrapped in a sock that barely held together. But what really caught Sundar's eye was the way the man looked up at him like he saw him. Not his money, not his job. Him. The man raised a shaking hand and smiled. "Hey, boss," he said. "Can you spare $1?" Sundar stopped, not because of the question. He'd been asked for money more times than he could count. But something about this man made him pause. His voice wasn't desperate. It was warm, almost joking. Right. They were old friends, and this was just a part of their routine. Sundar looked at him for a long moment. Something told him not to walk away. Something told him this was not just another homeless man, and not just another day. "What's your name?" Sundar asked. The man chuckled and scratched his beard. "People call me JD, short for just done, like I'm just done with this world. But I don't think I am. Not yet, anyway." Sundar smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You hungry?" "Always," JD said with a grin. "But mostly for company." That sentence hit Sundar harder than he expected. He looked around. Nobody was watching. He didn't have a meeting for another hour, so he sat down on the bench next to JD. Just like that. The CEO of Google, sitting next to a man with one shoe and two trash bags. They sat in silence for a minute. JD pulled out a half-eaten granola bar and offered Sundar the other half. Sundar shook his head, smiling, and then something surprising happened. JD started talking. He talked about his past, how he used to be a math teacher, how he loved numbers because they made sense when the world didn't. He talked about losing his wife to cancer and how the medical bills had crushed him. He said he had a daughter somewhere in the world, maybe in Florida, but she didn't return his calls anymore. "I stopped being a person to people," JD said softly. "Now I'm just scenery." Sundar felt a lump in his throat, not because he felt sorry for JD, but because some part of what JD said felt true for him too. People saw his position, his title, not his heart. "Can I ask you something?" said suddenly turning serious. Sundar nodded. "Why did you stop?" "I don't know," Sundar said honestly. "I think I just needed to hear someone else's story." JD looked at him for a long moment, then nodded like he understood something. "Deep. You're carrying something. I can see it. You can tell me. You'd be surprised what this bench has heard." Sundar hesitated. He was not used to opening up. Not like this. But something about JD felt safe. Real. "I made a choice last week," Sundar began. "A big one, and it might help the company, or it might hurt thousands of people. I keep wondering. If I made the right call?" JD leaned back. "Well, right and wrong ain't always clear. Sometimes the only way to know is to live through the fallout. But I'll tell you this, if you made the choice thinking about people, not just profits, then you're already ahead of most." Sundar looked at him. "How are you so wise?" JD laughed. "Man, being broke gives you a PhD in humanity." Sun rose higher. People started walking by, looking at their phones, not seeing the strange pair on the bench. One man in a suit did a double take and nearly dropped his coffee. Sundar didn't care. He was in the middle of something that felt more important than any boardroom. "You still haven't given me that $1, JD joked. Sundar reached into his wallet and pulled out 100. JD stared at it, then shook his head. "Nah, man. I don't want your money like that. I wanted to see what kind of person you are." "And?" Sundar asked. "I think you're the kind that forgot he's still human." Sundar swallowed hard. He had nothing to say to that. JD didn't say it. Cruelly, it was just a truth. And truths, when they're real, don't need to be shouted. Suddenly a phone rang in Sundar's pocket. It was a call he couldn't ignore. He looked at JD with regret. "I have to go," he said. JD nodded. "You'll come back." "How do you know?" "Because you haven't finished hearing the story." Noor stood up, paused, then did something strange. He took off his watch, an expensive one, and handed it to JD. "Hold this for me. I'll be back." JD looked at the watch, then at Sundar. "You sure? I trust you." JD smiled. "Then you're learning." Sundar walked away, his mind buzzing with thoughts he didn't have words for yet. He didn't look back. Didn't have to. He knew JD would still be there. But what Sundar didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that everything that had just happened was not a random meeting. Because JD is not who he seemed, and someone had been watching them the entire time from across the street, behind a tinted window. A camera zoomed in on Sundar Pichai and JD. A voice crackled through an earpiece. "We've made contact. The target took the bait." "Good," another voice answered. "Now let's see if he's really who the world thinks he is." And just like that, what seemed like a simple moment of kindness on a cold morning became the beginning of something much bigger. A face behind the glass for the next 3 days, Sundar couldn't stop thinking about JD. It was strange, really. He had met world leaders, billionaires, brilliant minds from Silicon Valley to Singapore, but none of them had left a mark the way JD had, not one. He sat in meetings, nodded at presentations, responded to emails with the kind of polite emptiness that no one noticed. But his mind always drifted back to that broken bus stop, to the man with the crooked smile and too many stories, packed inside him, and the watch. Sundar hadn't even realized it when he handed it over, but that watch was a gift from his father, given to him the day he got into Stanford. It wasn't just about money. It never was. It was trust. And now, as he stood in front of the same bench, again, 2 cups of hot coffee in hand, he hoped that trust hadn't been misplaced. But the bench was empty. No JD, no trash bags. No happy-tone granola bars or wisecracks about broken systems. Just silence. Sundar sat down, trying to feel something in the air. Anything. Had he imagined JD? Had it been a dream made of guilt and jet lag? "You're looking for JD, aren't you?" a voice said from behind. He turned around sharply. A young woman, maybe in her 20s, stood there holding a camera bag and a phone. She looked nervous, like she had something to say and no idea how to say it. "You know him, Sundar?" asked I. Sort of, she replied. "My name's Rena. I've been documenting people on the streets for a while. I interviewed JD last year. He's not like the others. He remembers everything. Reads poetry in the park when no one's looking. He writes in this old notebook he keeps in a bread bag." Rena paused, then added, "He also disappears sometimes. Just vanishes for weeks." Sundar stared at the bench again. He had my watch. I didn't care about the value. Just wanted to see him again. Rena hesitated. Then she pulled out her phone and scrolled. "You should see this." She turned the screen toward him. It was a video. JD sitting by the same bench, holding the watch. He looked straight into the camera and said, "If you're watching this, then I didn't come back. Don't worry, I didn't get mugged. I didn't run off. I just had to go somewhere. But tell the man who gave me this, tell him he reminded me I'm still a person." The video ended. Sundar's heart twisted. Where was this taken? Here, Rena said. "This morning." Chill ran through Sundar. If it was this morning, then JD had been here just hours ago. But where was he now? Rena stepped closer. "There's something else. Something I didn't put on my channel." She looked around, then handed Sundar a flash drive. "This was left in my camera bag yesterday. I don't know how. Wasn't there when I packed. I checked it this morning." And ... Well, you need to see it. Sundar took the drive. His phone didn't have a USB port, so he slipped it into his jacket pocket and nodded. "Thank you. Just promise me one thing," Rena said. "If you find JD, don't let him disappear again." He didn't promise. But he didn't have to. It was written all over his face. That night, Sundar sat alone in his apartment, the city lights pouring through the glass like static. He plugged the flash drive into his laptop and waited. The screen flickered. For a moment, it was just black dot. Then, a file opened. Not a video, not audio. Just a document. It read, Operation Compass Object. Pichai. Sundar objective, stage psychological catalyst event status. Engagement successful. Sundar leaned forward. Blood rushing in his ears. Beneath the heading was a detailed log. Times, locations, observations, every move he'd made for the past week. His walking routes, what he ordered for lunch. Even the moment he met JD, described like an experiment. Target made contact with subject under the guise of a homeless civilian. Subject displayed empathy, surrendered personal property, emotional vulnerability recorded at 86% intensity. Recommendation: proceed to phase 2. Sundar's stomach dropped. He read it again, slower this time, hoping it would change. It didn't. He tried to close the file, but before he could, second window opened. A video feed, grainy live. It showed a small room, white walls, no windows. And in the center, JD. He was seated on a plastic chair, hands folded on his lap, eyes closed like he was praying. Or waiting. A voice came from somewhere off screen. "He doesn't know you're watching yet." Sundar whispered to no one. What is this?" The voice responded, as if hearing him. "This is the truth, Mr. Pichai. You think you give people power with technology. But real power is understanding what moves a man to act." JD opened his eyes then, stared straight into the camera, straight into Sundar. "You're not crazy," JD said gently. "This was all real." But it wasn't. All honest. Sundar backed away from the screen like it had burned him. His thoughts spiraled. Was JD an actor? A plant? Was this some kind of social experiment? A corporate attack? Or something deeper? He slammed his laptop shut. His phone buzzed. A text. Number, it said. "You want answers? Meet me where the world ends and the city begins. Come alone. Bring nothing." Then a second message. $1 is just the beginning." Sundar stared at the screen, heart racing. Then he opened the drawer where he kept old things, and there, resting beneath a stack of forgotten papers, was a photograph. A younger Sundar. A beach. And standing next to him, holding a kite with a wild grin, was JD. But that couldn't be, because he had no memory of that day. None at all. The photograph that shouldn't exist photograph sat on the desk like a ghost. Sundar didn't touch it for a long time. He just stared. The image refused to make sense. There he was, maybe 19, maybe 20, wearing the same cheap watch he had given to JD just days ago. The sea behind him was wide and blue with waves that looked like soft fists. The sky held no clouds. Everything felt real, too real. And there right beside him was JD only. ... JD looked the same age as he did now, not younger. It's not different, just exactly the same. Sundar whispered the only word that made sense. "How?" No answer came, not from the room, not from his memory, not from the air around him, which felt suddenly too still, too thick. Like the air just before a power outage or an earthquake, he finally picked up the photograph, hoping for a clue. On the back, in neat looping handwriting, was a sentence. "You saw him before you knew what you were." Sundar blinked. He read it again. It didn't help. It felt like trying to solve a riddle written by someone who knew your deepest fears. He paced the room, dragging his hands through his hair, trying to breathe slowly. But who do you call when your life stops making sense? He opened the photo album on his shelf, flipping through pages quickly. Birthdays, graduation, his first time at the Googleplex. But nothing from the beach. Not that day. Not JD. Then another photo slipped out, one he hadn't seen in years. This time JD was in the background, blurry, standing beneath a tree at his mother's funeral. Sundar remembered that day well. Remembered the grief, the quiet crying, the soft sound of dirt hitting the coffin. But he did not remember JD. How many times had he been there? How many times had Sundar not noticed? His phone buzzed again. A third message, same unlisted number. We are the ones who whisper to those who can still listen. You've started listening. Now keep walking. There was an address. No name. No details. Just a location near the edge of the city where abandoned warehouses leaned against each other like old men trading secrets. Sundar knew he had to go. He didn't take a car. He didn't tell anyone. He left his phone behind for the first time in years. The silence felt both terrifying and clean. It took him almost an hour to walk there. The buildings grew uglier the farther he went. Graffiti, cracked windows, broken fences. The world here was forgotten, just like JD, and maybe just like Sundar was about to become. At the edge of a long alley stood a man in a yellow jacket. His face was hidden beneath a hood, but when Sundar approached, he didn't move. He just raised a finger and pointed. One building. A rusted door. Sundar pushed it open. The inside smelled of dust and electricity. Machines hummed quietly, but the place looked empty. Except for one thing, a chair in the middle of the room, and on it, a child's toy, a spinning top. Sundar stepped closer. He remembered this toy. His father had made one like it when he was a boy in India. They would play with it on the roof after dinner, laughing as the top spun until it tipped over. But this one was metal, smooth, silent, and it was already spinning. As Sundar stared, a screen lit up in the far corner of the room, and JD appeared. Not in a video. Not live. Just ... sitting in a chair. Looking directly into the camera. No introduction. No jokes. No smile. You're getting close now, JD said. I know this must be hurting your head. Yeah, but you're doing good. Better than I expected. Camera glitched slightly, then returned. You think you're a CEO? A decision maker? But that's just one layer. Underneath, you've always been something else, and I've always known. I've been waiting for you to remember. Out loud to no one? Remember what? The screen flickered again. Then it showed a file. Not a video this time. Not a photograph. A scan of a journal page. It's written in his own handwriting. Dated 25 years ago. Project Lighthouse test subject Pichai. Memory suppression successful. Phase 2 pending. His own words, his own name, but he had no memory of writing it. He backed away from the screen like it was alive. What is this? He whispered. The spinning top slowed. The room felt colder. And then came the final image on the screen. A map, a red, blinking, a message below it. This is where it all began, and where it has to end. You have 24 hours. Come alone. No one else remembers except you. The screen shut off. The spinning top stopped, and Sundar realized this wasn't a meeting. This was a calling. But what haunted him most wasn't the map, wasn't the screen, wasn't even JD. It was that strange, sick feeling deep in his gut, that maybe he had done something. Something terrible. Something even JD had been trying to help him forget. The lighthouse that wasn't there, blinking red dot, haunted him. It wasn't just a location anymore. It was a pulse, a heartbeat. A memory trying to claw its way back into the light. Sundar stood in the middle of his apartment, surrounded by the cold glow of city lights. But the air felt wrong, like the world had shifted sideways, just enough to knock everything out of place. He couldn't sleep. He didn't eat. He just stared at the coordinates written on a scrap of paper, like they might disappear if he blinked too slowly. They didn't. So the next morning, before the sky could decide whether it wanted to be blue or gray, Sundar packed a single bag, locked his apartment, disappeared. He took no phone, No computer, just the bag. The coordinates and the image of JD sitting calmly in that room like a man who had been waiting his whole life for Sundar to remember, something he'd spent his whole life trying to forget. The location was quiet, too quiet, a cliffside north of the city. Wild wind, endless sea. The kind of place people go to scream into the void and hope the ocean swallows their secrets. He followed the red dot to the edge of the rocks. There was nothing there, no buildings, no road, just jagged stone and salt air, and the endless sound of waves tearing themselves apart. But something about the place felt full, not empty, like something was here once, or maybe still was, hidden just out of sight. He walked in slow, careful steps. Each footfall kicked up memories that didn't belong to him, a child's laugh, a siren in the distance, the feel of rope tied too tightly around his wrist. None of them made sense, and then out of nowhere he saw it, not a lighthouse, a bunker sunken into the cliff like it had grown from the rock. Metal door, rusted keypad, no markings, no welcome. But Sundar knew. This was it. He approached slowly, tried the handle locked. Then, as if summoned, a small panel slid open on the side. A screen lit up. A face appeared. JD. He looked tired now. Not broken, just finished. Like a man who had finally run out of fight. You made it, JD said. I was worried you'd turn back. He just stared. This place, JD continued, was buried for a reason. It's where the world decided people like us didn't belong. People like us, Sundar finally asked. JD nodded. The ones who saw too much, felt too deeply. The ones who asked the wrong questions and got the right answers. The door clicked open. No password, no key, just surrender. The hallway inside was long, silent, smelled like metal and memories. The walls were lined with photographs, none labeled, but Sundar recognized the faces. People he had met years ago. People he had forgotten. Tried two scientists, engineers, and in the last frame himself. Not giving a speech, not leading a team, but strapped to a chair, eyes wide, mouth open, in a silent scream. He stopped walking, stared. JD single quotes echoed through hidden speakers. You were part of it too. Before you were Sundar Pichai, you were someone else. Someone who tried to shut it all down. Shut what down? Sundar whispered. But the lights didn't answer. Neither did the photos. They just kept leading him. Deeper into the earth until he found the room, the chair, and another man, hooked up two wires. Barely breathing, but familiar. A reflection. That's you, JD said quietly, stepping into the room. Sundar turned, startled. What? Your original body. What's left of it? Sundar staggered back. No, this is a trick. What's the truth? JD said. When you tried to stop them, they copied you. Wiped your mind. Sent you back into the world as a version of yourself that could be ... managed. Sundar stared at the man in the chair. Same face, same scar above the eyebrow, but eyes closed. Breathing slow. Why? Sundar asked. Because real thinkers scare people. And you scared them. Sundar's knees buckled. He sat on the cold floor. His mind raced through decades of memories, suddenly unsure which ones were real. Why did you find me now? He asked. JD knelt beside him. Because you're needed again. The world is changing, fast, and the ones running it, they haven't changed at all. They're still afraid of minds that wander too far. Sundar looked at him, eyes full of tears. Am I even real? You're real enough, JD said, touching his shoulder. More real than most. Silence filled the room, a heavy, final kind of silence. Then the lights began to flicker. A red alarm started blinking somewhere deep in the walls. JD stood up. They know you're here. We don't have much time. What do I do? Sundar asked, standing now, trembling. JD looked at him, sadness in his eyes. You choose. He handed Sundar a small device. A single button. Press this, and the Truth gets released. Every file, every experiment, every name. The world will know. And if I don't, Sundar asked, then this all goes back in the ground. Forgotten. Like it never happened. Like you never happened. The building shook slightly. Footsteps echoed above. They were coming. JD turned toward the hallway. I'll hold them off. Wait, Sundar called out. But JD paused only long enough to say one last thing. Thank you for coming back. Not everyone gets a second chance to wake up. And then he disappeared into the shadows, leaving Sundar alone. With a choice, a life, a life. Button and the truth. The choice no one remembers making Button was small. Laughably small. Just a little black circle on a smooth silver surface. No label, no warning. It didn't look like something that could break the world open, and yet here it was. In Sundar's hand throbbing with weight it shouldn't have. He stood in the middle of that cold bunker, surrounded by silence that felt less like absence and more like a breath being held. The only sound was the slow hum of the machines keeping his other self, live in the chair across the room. A self he didn't remember being, a life he didn't remember living. It would have been easier if JD had stayed, if there had been more answers. If the door hadn't sealed shut behind him like a tomb, but maybe that was the point. Some choices are meant to be made. Alone, the button didn't say truth. It didn't say freedom. It didn't say destroy or upload or save the world. It just waited, like it had always been waiting. And Sundar, he paced. He ran through the data in his head. Logic, impact, scenarios. He thought like the CEO he was. Like the engineer he used to be. Like the boy who once played with spinning tops on a concrete rooftop in Chennai, watching the sunset smear orange across the sky. And still, the answer wouldn't come, because this wasn't a problem that needed solving. This was a soul that needed deciding. He sat beside his original body. The version of him that remembered everything, or had once. That was just bones and breath and maybe a flicker of dream behind closed eyelids. What would you do? Sundar asked him. No answer came, only a small exhale from the tube by his side. Memories began slipping in again. Not like a flood. Not yet, just ripples. He remembered a room full of candles. People in white coats. A conversation in a language he didn't speak, but somehow understood. If he remembers, it's over. We'll wipe him again. He's too valuable. He's not valuable. He's dangerous. He remembered trying to run, a needle, a fire, someone screaming, and then JD. Younger, different, not homeless, not wise, but scared. Sundar blinked hard. JD had been there, not just now. Not just last week, he had always been there. A friend, a brother, no more like a mirror that cracked in a different direction. Outside, the alarms were louder. Boots on metal floors. They were coming to shut it down, to erase it again, and still the button waited in his palm. What if people aren't ready for the truth? Sundar whispered. The room answered with silence. What if it makes things worse? Still no answer. He thought about the world, his board, his friends, his family, he thought. About every person living their lives blind to how many layers they were standing on. How much had been built on forgetting, on choosing not to know. He looked down at his own hand, steady as his thumb hovered over the button. He thought about JD, disappearing into the dark with nothing but trust. And then something strange happened. His other self, moved, just slightly, a finger, then the eyes. They opened slowly, terribly, like waking from a dream. That had lasted decades. And Sundar saw himself, the real him, the original. They stared at each other. No words passed, just recognition, pain, and something like forgiveness. The other Sundar blinked once and smiled. A tiny smile, the kind you give someone when you've been waiting for them to remember, the kind you give when it's time, and then he nodded. Once slow, final Sundar pressed the button. The screen lit up instantly. Files began to pour out like water from a broken dam. Images, names, documents. stamped confidential and forgotten. Memories that weren't his, that now were. And not just him, the entire world. Every device, every screen, every corner of the internet flooded. It wasn't noise, it was truth. And it couldn't be stopped. He stood in the middle of it all, washed in light and memory, and a feeling he hadn't felt in years. Peace, for the first time in his life. Sundar Pichai felt peace, and then the lights went out, completely not. Just in the room, in him. Because when the truth was released, so was something else. Something they'd locked away with him. A key, a code, a message hidden in his mind since the beginning, and now that it was free, the whole world had 24 hours to decide what came next. The day the world remember out of 4 hours. That's how long it took for the world to crack open. At first, it was disbelief. News anchors stuttered through breaking stories with eyes wide and voices thin. Government sites crashed. Under the weight of unfiltered truth, conspiracies became footnotes. Myths turned into blueprints. The files were real. The experiments were real. Buried minds, the erased people. The test subjects they'd quietly renamed and released back into society. All of it. Real, and at the center of the storm, his face, Sundar. The man who had built a digital empire was now the reason. It trembled, but he wasn't there to see it happen. Not anymore. His body was found hours later, not the one in the chair. The original had gone still again, as if his only job had been to witness. It was the version that walked into the bunker. Pressed the button, made the choice. They found him collapsed beside the spinning top, which had somehow started moving again. No signs of struggle, no cause of death, just ... silence. And a small, peaceful smile on his face. The world changed in layers. Some people called him a traitor, others called him a prophet. The truth, as it always is, was somewhere between riots, vigils, debates that lasted weeks. Old systems cracked, but didn't fall. New ones rose from places no one expected, from classrooms, from park benches, from the mouths of people who had nothing but stories and a voice they weren't afraid to use anymore. And somewhere in the background, a man named JD vanished for good. No trace, no video, not even a footprint. Some say he was never real. Some say he still walks the streets, dressed in new clothes, waiting for the next person who forgot too. Much the spinning top was placed in a museum, but it never spun again. Scientists tried, curators tried, kids pressed their fingers against the glass and whispered stories about the man who freed the world and disappeared, but the top refused, as if it knew its job was done years later. A girl sat on a rooftop in India. Her father had told her stories. Bedtime tales of a man who gave away everything just to tell the truth. She didn't know if they were real, didn't care. She liked the way they made her feel. She opened a small box. It's passed down from her grandfather. Inside, a watch dot, old, scratched, still ticking, wrapped in a faded note. If you're reading this, then I didn't come back. Don't worry, I didn't get lost. I just had to go somewhere. She didn't understand the words, but she felt them like a whisper. Like someone sitting beside her in the dark, reminding her that truth doesn't always arrive with a parade, or a hashtag, or a trending headline. Sometimes ... it walks quietly beside you in a city that never looks up, with one shoe and 2 trash bags, and a question that starts it all. Can you spare $1? And somewhere far away, ... in a place the world had already forgotten, a camera, linked to life. Recording, waiting, because truth always leaves a trace, and it always knows how to find its way back. The end.